audience, welcome to the show POWERchat. In today's episode, we are discussing about justice for victims of enforced disappearances with particular focus on the role of civil society and transitional justice institutions. Today is the 10th anniversary of the Convention for the Protection of All Persons Against Enforced Disappearances. In the decade-long conflict in Nepal that occurred between 1996 to 2006, serious human rights violations were committed both by the government and the then Communist Party of Nepal, Maoist, and approximately 1,300 people were disappeared during this conflict, and the fate of many disappeared people is yet to be known. In this context, today we are discussing about the ways providing justice to the victims of enforced disappearances, and joining me today are two special guests, Professor Bishnu Pathak, who was the former senior commissioner with the CIEDP, the Commission on the Investigation of Enforced Disappeared Persons in Nepal. And we are also joined today by Mr. Debenda Adhikari, human rights activist, currently serving at Forum Asia as the South Asia Program Manager. Forum Asia is the Asian network of the human rights organizations. Let me welcome them. Welcome to the show, Professor Pathak and Mr. Adhikari.
Thank you.
Both of you have been into the field of human rights, peace, conflict resolutions, and all. And today, as I was mentioning, the 10th anniversary of the Convention for the Protection of All Persons Against Enforced Disappearances. And I would like to start with a very general question from Professor Pathak. How do you analyze the current state of human rights in Nepal in relations to post conflict justice system? You have been into the field of conflict and peace research nationally and internationally. Professor Pathak, your observation about the current state of human rights in Nepal.
Thank you very much, Laxman D. I firmly stand on and express my sincere gratitude, the solidarity to the victims, survivors, and the conflict victim organizations on behalf of this International Day of the Victims Enforced Disappearance. So, and secondly, yes, transitional justice is a gap between the two regimes. The older regimes could not be transferred properly to the new regimes. There is a lax remains between the two regimes. This is one hand. Secondly, when the regime changes, war crimes and crime against humanity in the terms of that human rights, serious human rights violations and abuses generally happen. So this is the part of this transitional justice, and on the situation of this current, present scenario, I would like to say that COVID-19, it is also the part of that economic, social, and cultural rights. It has been violated, not nationally, but internationally. And it has been a long impact, particularly to the people, direct and indirect victims. So we get a lot. Individual and collective victims, there are many, and over 2,500 committed suicide so far, and natural calamities also happening, and I guess that more than 500 by this landslide and flooding have already killed.
Professor Pathak, how do you see the state agencies' commitments on addressing the reparation and compensation and justice to the families of enforced, disappeared people in Nepal during the time of 10 years long conflict?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say that you said that there are 1,300 numbers, but working with the conflict victim people, particularly enforced disappeared person, we identified that there are 2,500 disappeared persons. So it has also been published in this, link of the CIEDP. You can also get the details of each and every individual, loved one disappeared. So what I want to say is that, on the course of these compensations and reparations, we have already completed our work till the reparations and institutional reforms also completed. So the truth seeking, we have also completed 80% of our work out of these 2,500 disappeared persons. And we also trying to, interrogate to the alleged perpetrators. On the course of that, the commission has given authority to form, given authority, and the interrogation committee was formed, headed by me on December 4, 2019, when this political party and government interrogation is already committed on, headed by this Professor Dr. Bishnu Pathak. So there had been a political hullabalo, and we were outtested in 45 days, amending the this TRC Act 2014.
Well, Professor Pathak, thank you. I will come back to you on the role of transitional justice institutions later, including that of the TRC and CIDP. We are
Yes.
also joined by Mr. Debenda Adhikari, working with Forum Asia as South Asia Program Manager. Mr. Adhikari, do you agree that a lot of works have taken place here in Nepal by the institutions like TRC and CIDP, as Professor Pathak was mentioning? What are the key lapses addressing the concerns of the families of victims of enforced disappearances in Nepal?
Thank you, Laxman D, for raising this most important thing. Think in this, the today in the, the International Day for the victims of, the disappears. So if you look at the current situations, the human rights situations of Nepal, we can easily, observe that the overall, the human rights situations of Nepal is not satisfactory in terms of addressing the 10 years long, the armed conflict, the issues in Nepal, because there are a number of, the human rights violation cases was occurred during that, the 10 years long armed conflict period. But till date, due to the, the lack of political will of the political parties and the government, the most of the, the transitional issues still remains the same. That is not a, the progress, the significant progress, to address the demands of the conflict victims and their family. So if you look at the past two, the transitional justice mechanism, specifically on the TRC and CIEDP roles, that is, the nothing happens on to the, the conflict, the victims and then families, and that that the TRC and CIDP just collected some testimonies of the, the victims and that victims during that period. So there is a kind of, the lack of trust in transitional justice mechanism mechanisms,
Mr.
from the,
Adhikari,
the victims.
do you agree that the commitments by the governments after 2005, to hold perpetrators of human rights violations accountable and provide access to effective remedies and reparations to victims have not been fulfilled?
Yeah, just one thing that I would like to the add here. Then, if you look at the commitment of the government to address the issues of the 10 years long armed conflict victims, yes, the government has committed to has that level of commitment so that they forms the two commission on that. So theoretically, I think the conceptually they are agree on that issue. But if you look at the implementation level, so they don't have that level of the commitment, so that they did not provide a kind of resources to that commission, and they also not appointed the appropriate person as a commissioner of that both commission. They only appointed those who supported to their the political ideology. So I think government has not that level of, the commitment as set by the international forum to address the issues of, the 10 years long conflict, providing, the justice, reparations, and reconciliation to the armed conflict victims. So it is, I can say that it is only limited in the words. Then when you comes to the implementation level, that is nothing happens to the armed conflict victims. Laxman, I think in this line, yeah, that is my, the experience based on in this field.
What are your key recommendations for taking specific measures to provide justice to the victims of enforced disappearances?
I think there are the certain the step they have to taken by the the government and the political leader, specifically the then the conflicting party. For example, they have to they give the full mandate to TRC and CIDP to investigate the cases without political interference. That is only possible to address the issues of armed conflict victims. And then, the independent victim-centric role of the staff at TRC and CIDP is necessary. And another thing, I think ensure access to justice and fair treatment to the victims without, the any hurdles during the process. And another thing, probably, the fair restitution to the victims, their family or dependents, that can ensure a kind of justice and a kind of trust of the the armed conflict victim to the government if they returns of property or payment for the harms or loss suffered. And then another part, probably government should ensure or provide a kind of the compensation to those the victimized during the 10 years long armed conflict, and those the disappeared families, they are still the asking for a kind of the assistance to the victims, the family, for example, they need a kind of education and health and accommodation on that, because they are facing, the tremendous problems, after the disappearance of their family members, after the killing of their, the family loved one. So the government should ensure the education to their children, and they should provide a kind of health facility, free health facilities to their family members, and they have to ensure the hands to mouth issue of the armed conflict victim, because they are the living in a kind of the pain and plight after the losing their the family members. That is my
Thank you, Mr. Adhikari. I will come back to you on some other issues. I'm going back with Professor Pathak. Professor Pathak, you are mentioning that during your tenure with the CIEDP, a lot more have been done, especially producing data and all. But the international community has been urging to amend the 2014 Transitional Justice Act, citing that it is not consistent with the international human rights standards that Nepal is a state party to. Also, it goes against the Supreme Court rulings, and they have reservation, especially on the provisions of removing amnesty for perpetrators. And in this condition, a few months ago, both TRC and CIDP commissioners were appointed with these transitional justice instruments. Do you see that there is relevance and effectiveness of these institutions without amending the 2014 Transitional Justice Act?
Yes, thank you very much. For this amendment, first of all, we need to go back to this, February 26, 2015, where the Supreme Court has given a verdict to amend the TRC Act, particularly focusing on provisions. One is that reconciliation, second one is that amnesty. So these provisions are still there, and again, the April 26, 2020, the Supreme Court, on the revision of that petition by the government, said that what they have already, given a verdict on August 26, it is right, and no revision, further revision is needed. It has already decided by the full bench recently. So means that first of all, we need to have a, this is the amendment on the TRC Act following the Supreme Court verdict first. Secondly, there are number of international instruments we need to, compare with them as well. The first one is that international public law, and secondly, international humanitarian law. Thirdly, we also that international human rights law. Fourthly, we also have a international criminal law. And finally, we also have a national legal dimensions as well. So means that the constitution, this act should be amended following this dimension. Secondly, thirdly, we need to have a separate special court and to file a petitions against the alleged perpetrators, but it is not yet been formed. For this purpose, we have already drafted a mandate to declare the disappearance acts as a criminalization act. So we have also handed to them the long back to the government, but the law is yet to be formed. I mean that so nothing has been done. And thirdly, we need to have a, this is a strong, this is a recommendation parts to these, commissions. These commissions have one kind of feeble and poor mandates. Only few mandates I have given, and there is no, I mean that the government agency, concerned agency, time and again do not, hear the voices of these commissions. For instance, this is, we also need this material, financial support, human capital. Sometimes, there are a number of reasons of emotional attachment with these conflict victims, but nobody is hearing. And they also try time and again visit to this, this commission office, but we have the central office in Kathmandu. We do not have a branch office, even in provincial branch office, even in district office. So on the course of that, we have already completed our detailed investigations in this 65 districts. But the thing is that we do not hear the voices of that, storytelling of these victim survivors, but we also equally need to understand, right to information, right to know, right to an effective investigations, and right to defense for innocence. We also need to give this time to this alleged perpetrator. But when the CIDP formed the, this is interrogation committee headed by me, in 42 days, they amended this act, and we were ousted. Means that now our finally who are there in this new commissioner, you can have a look. Cronism highly flourished, nepotism and favorism is there. This is first hand. Second hand is that if you see that, there are almost mostly lawyers there. Thirdly, there is no any communications, official communications between the conflict victim organizations. There are 40 conflict victim organizations practicing in Nepal. So no, I mean that, working relations develop with this newly formed these, commissioners. And fourthly, there has been a mistrust among the civil society actor, and even political leaders are not convinced that they are going to fulfill their new duties and responsibilities. For that purpose, this CPN Maoist task force, CPN Nepal Communist Party task force report just submitted recently with these two precedents. It has stated in this article 15.6.4, it has clearly stated that there has been a need of this TRC amendment. First, second one is that the amendment should be done following this inclusion of these expert persons. Thirdly, a high-level political commissions to be made to facilitate the entire process. It means that we need to have first of all, we need to have this TRC amendment, and it is to be done by the international standard of human rights, verdict of the Supreme Court, voice of the people, voice of this civil society, and so forth.
Well, Professor Pathak, you almost of the view that the appointment process is not consultative and transparent, and how can victims of the enforced disappearances would expect justice from the justice institutions, the constitutional bodies with power. So, what are the ways out? How can the post-conflict justice system be made more powerful, more effective at the moment, so that justice is provided to the victims and their families?
Thank you very much, Laxman. It is really a pertinent question you raise now. The thing is that, first of all, this is the amendment is necessary, as I have already said. Secondly, is that who were disappeared means that the principal actor of the family is disappeared. Principal actor means that all the property belonging to that family, it is liable with him or her. So that the first of all thing is that the land property rights to be transferred immediately with the immediate family member. This is second, and third one is that we also have a provision to stabilize this special court. So it is also to be stabilized as soon as possible. Fourthly, there are many victims' family that who have not still conducted their death ceremony. So we need to have this right to function rituals and rights of that loved one, finally, there has been a good cooperation and collaborations between these, transitional justice bodies as well as the political party, and this is civil society actors. We need to have an enhancement, and finally, trust building process is really needed. Trust building process means that we have a social mistrust, and we need to have a develop these social relations. Transitional justice means that there are three components. The one is that we need to heal the past, means that we have done a number of human rights violations, every day war crimes and crimes against humanity. And the secondly is that we need to reconcile today, means the present day. Reconcile means that we need to have a deliver the justice to the victims. We need to have a reparation. We need to have a institutional reforms. We need to have the truth trailing details. How people locked one where disappeared. So means we also the transitional justice system is now fractured. So we need to have a proper place amending the constitution, and we also need to have a develop a democratic systems governance. Then only the issue of these victims can be addressed. Otherwise it would be continue, and the pain, suffering, grievances will be there from home to street and nation to international institutions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pathak. If time permits, I will come back to you. I'm going with Mr. Adhikari. The civil society's role today is, heavily criticized, blamed to have been, serving the political interest. And the civil society role has been so weakened. There is criticism about that. What measures need to be, taken to put pressure on part of the civil society organizations for ratifying the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances? You are working with one of the largest civil society organization in Asia, Human Rights Organization, Forum Asia. Very quickly, Mr. Adhikari.
Yeah, thank you, Laxman Ji. This the very important question. Yes, in the context of Nepal, if you look at the past, the 2-3 years situation, and then even during the 10 years long armed conflict, and in the post armed conflict period as well, there is a blame that those who were the CSO leaders in the past and in the contemporary the current situation most of the leaders to whom we call the first generation civil society leader, appointed by the government in various government political positions. That is happened in this time, because most of the civil society, the leaders who raised their voice from the street and who raised the voice, of the the voiceless people. Most of them, who were in the the front line, or a kind of the visibility in their personality, they were they appointed by the government. So there is a kind of the blame to the civil society that they are heavily the engaged. They have a kind of the influence by the political party to the civil society field. That is the ground reality in this sense. If you look at that, to whom we said a kind of the first generation civil society leaders. And then if you look at the other side, then if the second generation and third generation, the civil society leaders are still raising their strong voices, and they have the strong presence on the street. They are the raising the voice of the civil society from the street and social media. So that is the strong voices again. Young, the civil society and human rights defenders, they are raising and that voice. So that is the reality. And it is also right time to bring the words into practice to, the first generation civil society, because they are in the position to fulfill and protect the human rights of the people or the victims. Because when they were in the street, they said that government should fulfill the, the needs of the victim.
Thank you, Mr. Adhikari. There are many interesting issues, but we are coming to the end of the show.
So now this is
I'm stopping you here, Mr. Adhikari. I would like to thank both of you for joining us. You have shared a lot more insights addressing the concerns of the victims of enforced disappearances in Nepal, marking the 10th anniversary today. I would like to thank you, both of you, for joining this special episode of my show, POWERchat. Dear audience, time now to wrap up the show. Keep watching us. See you next week. Namaste.